Hey, this is Mike.
Hey, this is Kaz, and you are listening to Two Broke Watch Snobs. We have made it all the way to episode 279. Michael, hello. We have guests. We have most
do.
honored guests.
I feel like I should have tidied up before having these two dudes over.
I should have combed my hair. That didn't happen.
I put a shirt on, kind of, but
I slept in the shirt.
that's comfy. That's comfy. Yeah. So let's welcome. We have someone who's been on the podcast before, so I'll introduce you first. Again, Dan, how you doing?
Hey guys, thanks for having me back on the mic. It's been a very long time, but I'm really pleased to be back here with you guys tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you were on episode 75 with us way before we hit the 3 digits, and it was talking vintage military watches with your old Instagram handle.
Yeah, that is a blast from the past, guys. Yeah, I mean, 200 and something episodes later, I'm here with my own podcast, and we're not talking so much about military watches today, are we? We're going to talk a little bit more about modern watches and kind of what's occurring in, like, I guess, the modern military watch space and how that affects the wider watch fam as it stands today, which is really cool. So glad to be back here.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. And we have a newcomer to the Two Broke Watch Snobs podcast as a guest. We're pretty selective with our guests here, especially recently. So it's an honor to have you both. And Larry, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey, what's going on, gentlemen? My name is Larry. I am the moderator, owner, writer, everything for the Instagram page at PSYWAR Wristcheck. The purpose of my page is I try to retell U.S. Army psychological operations story through wrist checks. It's now expanded to the broader joint combined community. So I've started highlighting military watches that people are wearing across the military. Whoever will submit it and will give me their little story, I like to highlight it that way. Since watches are huge in the military world, the federal government world, and like for me, I've always viewed watches as kind of the person's expressive blend between utility and their aesthetics. Since all
Right.
the uniforms the same, the watches stick out. So I love retelling everyone's story. And just like Dan, I've been working on a lot of watch projects for the PSYWAR Regiment and the psychological operations global community.
Hell yeah, so cool. You know what's so funny, and this is something that Mike, you and I learned recently, and I know we'll talk about this more. I always had this idea in regard to military watches is that it's just something someone gets, issued. Sometimes they don't get issued it. They get, they'll go and buy $15 Casio, and it's just something that they have. But in speaking with a lot of amazing guests like yourself and previous people, I've started to get a sense of how important an actual functioning wristwatch is to people in specific enlistment fashion. So this is going to be super cool in terms of the whole episode. So welcome, Larry. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Heck yeah. Mike, let's do this. This is going to be a legendary wrist check, but we have to honor tradition. How do you want to do this? How do you want to navigate?
I think there might be
wrist
some
checks.
There might be some overlapping brands here. I think you can start. I'll go, and then we'll leave it to our guests.
Okay, I'll go very fast. I'm just wearing my Grand Seiko SPGV 233. I was gonna put on my Paul Yacht 3133 just so I could have something at least remotely interesting in terms of street cred. But then I remembered, like Dan was saying, we're not doing vintage military watches, and then I realized I would end up talking too long about the 3133 like I'm doing now. So I thought I would just keep it a short wrist check, and I would just wear my Grand Seiko SBG V233 9F quartz. That's right, it's quartz. Suck it, nerds.
It's your show, man. I think
Quartz all day.
I'll let Larry speak for himself, but I think he's a Grand Seiko guy also. You have one just like that, or the black one? Is it, Larry, that you have?
Yeah, I do. So this is
Cool.
the SBG 261.
Yep.
And the exact same reason as you, Kaz. The biggest one for me were two things: were aesthetics and the fit. So compared to
Oh my God.
the Snowflake,
Yeah.
I wore this and I was like, yep, this is it, Chief. And
Mhm.
I kept it on.
I love it. So good. But that's my super quick wrist check. I want to leave enough time for everyone.
Yeah, I'll be fast. I'm wearing a. I haven't shown this on the show yet, but I'm wearing this. I'm
Oh
wearing one of the
yeah.
Praesidus, the A11 Type 44 patina. So this is, and I have the 32 millimeter model here on. I don't have it on the green canvas strap that it came with, but I have it on a single pass 16 millimeter. I think it's kind of like a Vietnam era strap that you might have seen with some of the older Seikos from that period. But this thing is cool, and you would think, I can show it here. 32 millimeters is sounds small, but I think it looks pretty good.
It looks great.
Um,
Heck yeah.
Swiss movement, just a little over $500. I'm pretty stoked with it. Manual wind, and it hits me in the feels. I really do dig this watch.
Which movement is in there?
Uh,
32
th-
millimeters manual line Swiss.
so this would be, let's look at the 32 millimeter
It's
specs.
SOPROD movement, I believe.
Yeah, Soprod
Oh,
P024 manual movement.
heck yeah. You're happy with it?
I like it a lot so far. I didn't like the strap so much, so I took this off.
Sure.
I actually ruined this when I took it off, so sorry, Praesidus. We'll talk about that later. Um, but yeah, I like the watch a lot, especially on this strap. It's pretty cool.
That's amazing. Awesome. That's your and my wrist check. Who wants to go next?
Larry, I think you should go, man.
All right. So to follow Mike's trend, I am wearing the PSYWAR A11 from Praesidus. So I'll take it off to make it easier for everybody. So this one, I swapped out the strap the canvas strap they gave us, and I put a Fluco Niza anthracite suede leather watch strap. Mostly because my Nomos is the most comfortable watch strap ever, and I've always wanted to kind of match it without purchasing from Nomos. But this one is 38 millimeters, based on feedback from a lot of guys within the regiment. I've tried to push for 32, tried to inform them on the A11's history, but a lot of people wanted that wrist presence. And my first worry was we have a lot of females within the regiment, and I wanted to give them a shout out too. But an overwhelming number of females ended up purchasing the watch, and they're always wearing it. But for this one, what makes this different is I don't think you can really see it in the camera here, but it says PSYWAR embossed at the just below the 12 o'clock, and then above the
Nice.
six is the PSYOP regiment crest, which would be this guy. We call him the Thunder Horse.
Cool.
Um, and then we have the numbers 2, 4, 7, and 8. So for second group, fourth group, seventh, and eighth group, those are the active and reserve PSYOP units. So that was their shout out. And in the case back, it's the NH35 Seiko movement with the Ghost logo embossed on it. And following CWC watches, where they used to issue their serial numbers, I took the painstaking time and issued serial numbers to every person that purchased one. So it was a unit
Nice.
identifier and then an individual identifier. So yeah, that's what I got here.
That's so cool. Personal to you and just personal to in regards to other folks in the PSYWAR space. You know, that's super cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, it's a really cool watch, that, bro. I actually was invited to buy one as well, loosely being affiliated with the more wider global Ops community, which is really cool. I'm not wearing my PSYWAR today because I knew that that Larry would be. So I've got a different watch on today. I've got a Christopher Ward C63 Sealander, but again, this is
Cool.
a military project. You can't quite see it on the dial here, but it is a military project to the intelligence corps within the British Army. This has the green second hand, and it has a Tudor rose, and it's got scarlet writing in the bottom, which encompasses the core colours loosely. So you've got grey, in the rose, you've got the green and the scarlet on a white background, and it's the only military watch special project that I've got with a white dial, which is actually the reason why I bought it. It intrigued me. And if I quickly take it off, on the back, it's got a really cool like laser engraving on the display case back, which is again a Tudor rose logo, which is really cool. And I haven't seen that on a watch for a very long time, and it really interested me, so I just had to buy it. So there you
Nice.
go. I'm wearing it on a bond clip bracelet to bring out the vintage military kind of vibes and feels for summer, mainly because it's infinitely adjustable within the length of itself. So it's also a very
Wow.
comfortable strap.
Is the rose logo in place of the typical Christopher Ward logo?
So yeah, so the Rose logo is at 12 o'clock, and then they've moved the Chris Ward flags to the 9 o'clock position. So it doesn't say
Wow.
Christopher Ward on the dial; it just has the
That's really
flags
cool.
instead, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's very different from what you'd see from
Right?
them anywhere.
It's also really interesting. Mike and I have had the pleasure of, recently in the past year handling a fair amount of Christopher Ward pieces uh, miles away from where the brand was, years and years and years and years ago when I first heard about them. So in terms of quality, I was totally blown away. So that's just super cool to see this,
I
see
I
what
would
you
agree
have.
with you as well. Like I was saying before we started recording, that was another reason for me to buy it was
Mm,
I was influenced by Larry and PSYWAR Wristcheck because he is also the owner of a Chris Ward military project. So I was interested straight from the off, but I've owned a previous version that's no longer made. It was a chronograph quartz watch, and again, the dial finish, the case finish, and stuff has just come on leaps and bounds in the last 9 years because I bought that watch. Well, that project was commissioned in 2015, which was the centenary of my first ever unit. So those personnel who served at that unit on the centenary were invited to buy those watches, of which I did. And like I said, it's just a completely different vibe to that first watch. So yeah, really cool.
amazing. Heck yeah. That was a killer wrist check
Nice. I dig it.
all around.
Yeah, so we can get into main topic stuff now, Kaz. I think we can just let things evolve and I don't know
I
if
have
you
so
have
many
any questions.
questions.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I don't have questions. I more have just these things flying into my head, which might be early signs of something I should see a doctor about. But like, I just have so many questions in regards to modern military watches from the perspective of people who are like actively involved and who are also watch collectors. I have so many questions in regards to watches and everyone in the psyops operations, these kinds of things. And so I think the thing that I'm always interested in, and Dan, I know we all talked a little bit, but I would love to kind of maybe kick this over Larry first. But um, were you into watches before you got involved, in terms of psyops or anything like that, or did it come after the fact?
So I was into watches before without realizing how much into it I
Ah,
was. So my origin story started when I was just a young lieutenant, and my sister platoon leader is one of my best friends. He showed me his father's Rolex, and he was telling me like, hey, it was a family tradition that when you graduate college, every person in his family would receive their father's watch. So he had a Rolex Submariner. He started talking about the automatic movement, and I had no idea what that was. So then that was when I purchased my first watch before deployment. That wasn't the $15 Casio. It is
right.
the 007, SKX
Oh, heck
007.
yeah. That's
And
cool.
and I wore this on every deployment from the Middle East all the way to Asia. So it's been all over the world. And that's kind of where this whole kind of love for it started. Was this thing's my story. I've haven't had it serviced, so huge props to a almost 12-year-old watch, and and the fact that it's still kicking. The bezel doesn't really turn anymore, and I'm pretty sure it's because there's sand from the Middle East, and I refuse to clean it out.
Oh no, leave it there. That's your sand now. Yeah, no, leave that
Exactly.
in there.
Absolutely. I refuse to. It's my heritage. And I have a lot of people in my unit that say, hey, man, it's a really easy cleanup. And I refuse to. And the more
Oh,
that I pay attention to it, like I mentioned earlier, that it's a first impression, the watch that you wear. And that's when I started noticing that a lot of people in the military are watch snobs, if you will, uh,
yeah.
with Seiko, Citizen, and I would say Sunto being the most popular, and it's always been a conversation starter. There's always what we call a expensive vice that kicks off conversations in our community. It's whiskey, watches, and bourbon. Oh, sorry, whiskey, watches, and cigars. So I've made friends in the cigar pit on deployment. I've made friends with international partners sharing a whiskey, and then watches has always been, hey, it's a cool watch. What you got there? And
That's
they started
cool.
talking out. Yeah.
Do you have more likelihood of making watch friends in the wild in the military than I would like in the elevator at work? Because that happens to me all the time. I'll be like somewhere like in a mall and I'll be like, oh, that person's wearing a Citizen Ecozilla. That's not like a normal watch. Maybe I should talk to them. Like, no, they'll probably just think I'm a weirdo. I don't know. I know that's an experience that everyone else has, but you see someone wearing a watch and you want to say something, but you've been burned in the past before, so you just stop saying anything. Are your chances of possibly making a watch friend increased if you were in the military and that happened?
Absolutely,
That's
especially
cool.
in the government space, and a
Oh.
lot of us are very passionate about it because I'm just making ballpark numbers up here. Probably a vast majority of quote unquote watch snobs within the military, they all have that one watch that they've worn on every deployment training, or it's the one that, for example, I have it in my safe downstairs, but I still carry my very first watch, which was what my parents gave me before I left for basic training. So like that's been like
This
kind of like
the
holding on to me.
sentimentality.
Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah.
that's the big part, and um, expanding that into the watch market and the military with the watch market. You know what? A lot of watch brands are they have been doing it. Rolex is really good at it. Omega is very good at it. Is what story is it tying? And then with Rolex, with its reliability, you know how well built it is. Like you can wear it, pass it down. That's kind of been their stick to it, and I've been noticing lately a lot of watches are very military-esque. So they're looking like the A11s, the dive watches, the Submariners. And at first I thought it was kind of like, hey, this is, the military is cool. We want to embody that. But I really think it's because military watches are supposed to be functional. So they're all legible. They're in all conditions. They all have the loom. And they're all aesthetically just very aesthetically pleasing that it's subtle without being too loud. And that's what I'm seeing across the board. Where on the flip side, I've also seen brighter colors. So if I was making a guess right now, I think people are starting to grow an interest in watches, and now they're starting to throw
Mm.
louder colors. If you've been noticing the latest releases, a lot of Tiffany blues and brighter pinks.
Which kind of gets the sense of, hey, this idea of functionality is there, but now we have a little bit more interpretive room to be a little more flair or a little more, I guess, kind of out of the box personality. So that's funny. You mentioned someone's dad's Rolex in your origin story. I'm sure Mike and Dan, you guys can appreciate this. I feel like everyone's origin story has some person's dad's Rolex involved in the beginning in some way, shape, or fashion. I have no idea why.
Yeah, it's my grandpa for me, and that's
It's
that's
my dad for
the
me.
that's the date just that I got serviced and then gave to my dad. And then
Hmm.
he tried to force gift it to me, and I was like, "Nah, man, this is yours now." And
How do you force gift a Rolex? Do you like tie it to a brick and throw it in your window in the middle of the night and just like
well,
drive off like? "Arr."
he did this weird dad thing where I showed him like this kind of just gesture of goodwill
Hmm.
and love, and he just didn't know what to do with it. So he's like, I don't know what to do with a gift from you. Here, you take it. So I he just, I had to tell him like, hey, this is yours to wear right now, and maybe someday it'll come to me. So we'll see. So yeah, it was my grandfather's Rolex for me.
There you
Mine
go.
definitely
Heck,
didn't. Mine definitely didn't start with a Rolex.
that's
But yeah,
right.
I think I started the tradition in my family with watch collecting. So,
Nice.
Really?
but it's always got to start somewhere, right? You've got to be a trendsetter. However, we talk about watches that were handed down. For me, it wasn't a Rolex; it was a Amiga. So,
Oh, cool.
So which one is
so
that?
yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to see on the camera.
This is the Amiga
You're good.
Chronostop. So
Oh, cool.
Amiga Chronostop. So it's 34 mil. This watch actually, you like this. So the movement is effectively, if you imagine the Speedmaster movement without the subdials, effectively that's what it is. So it's a minute chronograph, which I'll just operate for you now. So obviously, but then you would press and hold, and then it flies back to zero to automatically reset. So it's
Oh,
a bit different.
cool.
It was very popular with racing drivers for their mile a minute kind of short races and all that kind of stuff.
Nice. I've never seen the operation of that movement, so
That was really cool.
that's
I've
impressive.
got an actual video. I'll send you a video that I may have screen grabbed off YouTube that kind of shows it obviously in more detail than on the screen that you just saw. But yeah, it's a very cool watch. Very cool one.
Nice. Yeah, one of the things that we talked about just now was the I'm seeing a deeper proliferation of military watches in the realm of watch research interest. I think I feel like maybe 6 years ago I had to do way more research if I wanted to learn about an old CWC or like an old Smith's W10 that I still miss, Dan. You can always make fun of me for that.
I will do.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So, and I think there's just such a wealth of information now, and that's always a good thing. That's just the evolution of the internet and social media and things like that. I mean, you have whole subreddits dedicated, I think, like JSOC archives and just random photographs of special forces and what gear they're using, down to like the optics and the camo and the chest rigs and everything. And I think the same thing is happening with watches as well. And watches of espionage is kind of a good example of that. I mean, the guy kind of launched on YouTube 4 weeks ago. He's already at 22,000 subscribers and one of the
Good for him.
fastest growing like Instagram accounts in the watch world recently. So kind of interesting to see that focus expand and just interest in this general mill watch world just increase over time.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. And I think in the space where, like you said, the evolution of the internet, people are willing to talk about it. There's high def imagery pretty much everywhere now. And then, like you said, I think the veracity of like wanting to know more in terms of knowledge and finding these older photos and people just becoming very analytical in trying to find out what watches were used is really, really interesting in this space. But, I think as well, moving it back to a point that Larry made earlier, where, we're never going to necessarily compete directly with the smartwatch market, be that Apple, Garmin, Sunto, etc. But we can, in terms of analog watches, these companies that are obviously in front of me here are examples where you can offer people an alternative that can accompany that smartwatch. And I think that's interesting to see a trend and shift of going away from a connected device to something which is analog, be that digital quartz or just not connected in that terms of analog, is interesting. I spoke to AJ over at the Analog Explorer podcast, and he is a lecturer in university, for want of a better expression, and he was saying that a lot of his students and the younger generation coming up are now actively choosing to buy something that is not connected because they just feel like, the connected world is everywhere. Why should I have something else on my wrist, that does that as well?
That's so good to know. I had lunch with him a while back because he's over in this side of the country, and That's encouraging. Yeah,
Mm.
that's good to know.
No, I agree. I agree. But like you said, it's interesting to see, like you said, the effectively that influence piece in terms of like, Larry and I would probably call that, information and influence, you know, operations effectively is being conducted within the watch, kind of marketing and advertisement to say, well, look, this is also an option. And clearly, latching on to certain stories, you gave the example of Amiga and Speedmaster, Rolex and Submariner. You could do Tag and Carrera as another example, and turn around and say, well, if you advertise a story, you're selling a story, you're selling a lifestyle to these people, not necessarily an item. And I think this is the same with military watches. Certain companies are selling a feeling to evoke something, not necessarily a watch, right?
Yeah,
Is there a dark side to that? Oh, sorry,
I,
Mike.
no, I think there is a dark side to that, and you know, it'll happen with a watch like this, this A11 clone. Oh, this is the watch that won the war. That's one of the headlines that I've seen before, and I'm supposed to feel like I'm storming the beaches when I wear this. So
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing when you wear that watch. It's exactly the same thing.
yeah, of course. Just I took out the trash. Yeah, it's just the same thing. So I don't know how I feel about that. It's the whole selling the feeling thing. I do relate with the concept of course, finding a story behind a watch if we're into them. I think that's inevitable. We all kind of do that. Whether it's like um, a Slava Medical or a CWC like 1980 diver, you try to find out why that's important in the continuum of watchmaking and watches in general. But it's not going to change your life. It's not going to turn you into the tough guy that you think it is. And I see that a lot with military watch advertising, at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the same boat with you on that one, Mike. Like I've always thought that, hey, if I buy an Omega Speedmaster, that makes me an astronaut, right? But I think but what the story does is it at least exposes a person to the watch itself. So I like to use the Moon Swatch as an example, right? It's a very contested topic within the watch community. People think, hey, why would Omega subject themselves to relating to Swatch? When in reality, right, just that watch, a well-known brand Swatch with Omega merging at a very accessible price point. You've had, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I've written an article on it. It was about an 88% increase in Google searches for the Speedwatch or the Speedmaster, sorry. And it's 300% increase on Swatch searches overall. And then turning that into how effective that marketing campaign was, it was a 30% ballpark increase in actual Speedmaster sales. So people, and I love how they took the Moonswatch and made it exactly the same specifications and sizing and fitting as a Moonwatch because people will wear it and they're like, okay, what's the real thing like? And then they pull the trigger. So when it comes to these watches, right, like from the kind of the story standpoint, right, you'll see, hey, this special forces commander wore this watch. Okay, that's a cool story. And then they'll start digging a little bit more into the watch and they'll start reading about it, which brings you to point number two, which is I think when it comes to behavioral science, people, when it comes to something this expensive, especially a piece of technology that we don't really need when our phones can do it, they're very practical. Why am I spending this amount of money? And tying to that story, like the Rolex has been on wrists of soldiers through the decades. This thing has survived X wars. With the Breitling, this was a tool, tool for pilots. I love how they call them instruments as opposed to tool watches. And it's like, hey, this is tried and true. I'm getting my money's worth because this will last, the lifetime I could pass it down. And it's kind of inspiring people to write their own story when they turn it. Because once every time I swipe that card or I buy a new watch, it's kind of that like painful, I spent that money. So I want to make sure that everything that I purchase, or if I'm recommending a watch for someone, that it's a practical decision and it's not just because of the story, not just because this watch went to the moon. Like, you got to actually want it, and it's aesthetically and fitting for you.
I think it's a hard series of things for most folks to kind of ask themselves when they're trying to be that conscious about a purchase, but it makes sense. Larry, I have to ask, is that a Breitling emergency?
It is not. It is the aerospace.
Aerospace. Okay, I couldn't
Yep.
tell from this angle.
Yep. Sorry. This is my first luxury watch.
So cool.
It's always been the Rolex Explorer 1 was the dream watch, and then 3 years into a waiting list, I started reading more and more into watches, and again, just like most seasoned watch enthusiasts, the more I read, the more I saw something that I liked. And for me, it was always the fitting. As much as I love the SKX 007, she's a big girl for my wrist. And then I tried that on in titanium, and I fell in love with it. And it's my most used watch, especially when I became a new dad. So
heck yeah,
use the crap out of its functions.
You were on the waiting list for an Explorer 1 for 3 years.
Yes, and I still am. And I've been So the story they're telling me is they received 2 Explorers. So there's an AD about an hour north from me, and they claim they received 2 Explorer 1s a year. And I was number 16 about 2 years ago. So I was like, I'll pass. The time will come, maybe.
Wow.
I'm convinced it's because, just like most ADs, if you quote unquote build that relationship and purchase watches, because one of my coworkers, we call him the Rolex Godfather. He's been collecting Rolexes since the 90s.
Wow.
He purchased, I think it was 2 Tudors, and then 3 months later he got the call for the Hulk. It was either Hulk or the Starbucks.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's how it is. Was there is there like an aversion to just trying to find something used or gray market, or is it part of the narrative of the journey of getting that watch to get it new from an AD or a boutique?
So another thing I'd like to point out about the military community is we're not made of money. And I could not personally justify spending X percent over MSRP for a watch. And the Explorer 1 I think my rule was if it's within $1,000 of MSRP, I'll pull the trigger, but it has to be in good condition. And every Explorer 1 used that I saw at the time, it needed significant work, and it was going to cost more than what I was receiving anyway. So
that's fair.
That's when I started reaching out or looking around. And then when I got and I went with Quartz with the aerospace because I wasn't sure how expensive servicing was. Whereas I know this is a significantly more affordable service interval than a Rolex. So it takes a while for me to buy a high-end luxury watch. I have to really do my digging and really think about it. And I could probably speak for a good chunk of the military communities. They do sit there and they think about it. Like the Christopher Ward right here, the C63 Sealander, that was $800 to $1,200 depending on the bracelet and strap. And a lot of people really thought about it. And some of them said, hey, this is going to be my retirement watch. Others said, hey, this is it, one and done. But once they're in the game and they understand it, now they're reaching out to my page. Hey, man, what are your thoughts on Hamilton? Hey, what are your thoughts on the Omega? And that's how that snowball effect kind of rolls down the hill. Is basically once you get a person in the watch game and the more they read into it, then that's how the watch market thrives. Like, I've always wondered why this is still pacing against the smartwatch community.
So I have a question about that Christopher Ward. Is that this watch that we have right here?
Let's see. Yes, it is. That's not the watch per se, same exact model. But the person that created the Ghost in the Machine video, he was one of the original PSYWAR customers.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I was curious about that because this was sort of there were some accounts posting about this, and it was just fascinating to me to see this kind of recruitment video and to see just like a Christopher Ward like so in focus here. So I don't know what kind of background you can share on that or if you know anything about it, but this is This was really cool when I saw it.
Absolutely. So I'm not speaking on behalf of the creator of the video, but he's one of my really good friends, and it's very interesting to see the comments and how people react to it. And they're saying, "Oh, PSYOP guys don't kick down doors." Like in a couple of the scenes, they don't do this super secret CIA spy stuff. The point of the video is after you finish watching it, whatever emotion you felt, that's our job. Is whatever product we give out, whatever feeling it is, right? Now we've caught your attention. Whatever that emotion is, that is the best way to explain influence to a foreign person, because the easiest way to explain psyop is like the challenge that we have is we need to have a person to stop action A and start action B. So tying this to, let's say, Listerine commercials, right? They're not telling you to buy Listerine. They're just informing you to that bad breath is bad, right? And let people have that choice to purchase Listerine, exposing them to that. So, when we're messaging someone, right, especially when we're deployed, right, the challenge is we need them to stop listening to whatever they're listening to, whether it be the adversary or, the adversary state or the adversary military, and then start listening to action B, which is US or partner messaging. A lot of people think that marketing is just skipping to B, like just listen to us. No, the first challenge is how do you get them to stop paying attention to the first one? So tying that to the video, a lot of within our techniques, the biggest one is always emotion. So we're going to present all this information, these images, this soundtrack, whatever it is, and then whatever you feel, whether some people are super gung ho, or on the opposite, they're terrified, or some people are just kind of saying, well, that's a lie, that's not what they do. That emotion is what that video was trying to invoke, because it's tough to kind of explain our job to a lot of people. Ironically, in the field of communication, it is difficult to give you a bumper sticker explanation.
Interesting.
Are there if there's a certain emotion you're looking to evoke with some kind of medium like that, is it better to do that if you anticipate what emotion they're feeling before? And by that, I really mean, is it easier to positively affect an outcome on like a video like that if you already have a sense of where someone is emotionally before they start the video, based on maybe why they started watching the video? Because they have to, in regards to something like that, they have to sort of click to get there. Does that make sense? Or is it more of a wider net that I'm thinking of?
It's a very wide net. This is common in the theory of marketing and behavioral psychology. When it comes to messaging and influencing someone, we can't really. It's almost impossible to predict the outcome. It's always based on afterwards, the after action, the effects after the hand. So we try to rely on historical data and hope that we can predict this is going to be the emotion they'll feel. Same goes for watches, right? Like if let's say I'll just keep using the Speedmaster just because it's an easy example. They produce a commercial, watch that went to the moon, whatever it is. They hope that they can get people excited. Did they? I assume that they did, but at the time when they produced that hypothetical commercial, there's really no model that can accurately predict it. So the very first step is just, hey, get them in emotion, like get them to feel and experience an emotion, kind of pay attention to it, and let them do their own homework. Hey, I'd like to know more about this. Hey, let me look at similar information regarding to this. So when it comes to my profession, right, just getting them exposed to foreign messages. It doesn't have to be US, but if it's foreign, US, or even one of our partners, I consider that a win, because that should let them make the choice.
Well, that's really interesting, because I guess a lot of the conception that folks have. I work in like just digital marketing, so regular stuff, particularly like online marketing, things like that. And so I think the perception that a lot of people have is just brute forcing a message, get something in front of someone to buy something. But what you're talking about is actually, I think much more appropriate to just the history of trying to lead someone down towards making a decision on their own. You're presenting them with information in such a way where it's attached to an emotion, and they really finish walking the path based on some of those things you put in place first. So that's super fascinating, and it's It's just really cool to kind of think about things in that way. I'm also very paranoid of every medium I ever see anything, whether it's a commercial or like a chewing gum ad. I don't trust nothing out there. So you're
leaflets
reinforcing.
falling from the sky. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't. I haven't trusted a leaflet. They try to sell me water purifiers through a leaflet. No, man, I don't trust it. I don't believe in
Uh,
none, dude.
but for
I'm telling
Mike,
you.
that watch itself, I'm pretty sure it's because the director is a huge watch fan, just like we all are. And that watch is the most sought after watch in the regiment. That was a one-time release, and that exclusivity just made people want more and more and more. And with my future projects, a lot of people are asking if I'm ever going to revisit it, and I will not. I want to keep progress moving forward. And I don't mean to give a shameless plug, but my next two projects, one is more on the tactical aspect for a lot of my soldiers. And then the second one, which is going to take a little bit of time, is I'm trying to now showcase art from someone within the regiment. We have a lot of creative people. So I've been asking around if anyone has experience in artistic calligraphy. And if I get something that actually sticks out, I'd like to feature that in a future project. But yeah, I'm the
That's
same way,
awesome.
man. I wouldn't like Ford spent millions of dollars to associate the words Ford and tough, and they haven't released those commercials in decades. And when people want to buy a truck, they immediately turn to Ford.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was getting Mike Rowe in those Ford commercials. Does anyone remember? Is he still? I don't know if he's still narrating Ford commercials,
No, I
but that
don't
really
think
did it
he.
for me. You know
I don't
Mike
think
Rowe,
he
the Dirty
has
Jobs
to.
guy, or am I dating myself?
No, I know who he is.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure.
Yeah,
That's funny.
and
You're totally right,
and
though, Larry.
and when I saw that recruitment video, for me it cemented Christopher Ward in that space because, they still are a relatively young brand, and Dan, the last time we talked about unit watches and things like that from maybe larger companies like Braemont or Omega, things like that, and it was just kind of cool to see a moment where Christopher Ward planted their flag and just let people know like, hey, we're here too. So um, that was pretty cool, and so I figured I would ask about those Ghost in the Machine ads. Um, yeah.
That's wild.
So I don't know
I'm
if we
sorry.
talked about it, but like, do each of you want to just jump in for a quick second to talk a little bit as comfortable as you can get about your professional background and how this kind of like ties into to watches overall? And again, feel free to talk about you know podcasts or personal ventures that you might want to bring up.
I think Dan should go first on this one. I've been talking a lot.
Is he still there?
His image is still there, or his camera's still there.
Okay.
Oh, his hand is still there. We just can't hear him.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, well, let's do this. Dan, just write on a piece of paper what you want to say, and then we'll all take turns. We can see your hands. We can't hear you.
Maybe try logging out and logging in again, Dan, and then we can go we can go with Larry.
I think his microphone's or his camera is nodding.
That's
Um,
so funny.
sure. So, quick historical background for me. So, I've been in the military for over 10 years now. I started out as a field artillery officer, a lot of targeting background. And on my first deployment, I was exposed to PSYOP. I originally wanted to do sign up for special forces. That was kind of the young Larry's dream. And then the more I kind of read into PSYOP, I was very interested in the fact that every professional that I've met had a different story. And I just thought that kind of a adventure in itself was fun. But then at the same time, too, just the world of influence and communications was something that I've always been inherently interested in. So it was kind of a, hey, I'll try it out and let's see how this goes. And it was a great gamble because I love the profession. I'm a company man for it. Tying that into watches and why I do this project, it's because it's always answered. It's the question that I always ask myself regarding watches is how are watch companies attracting new customers? Whether you're trying to whether you're trying to convert, sorry, whether conversion from the smartwatch Apple world to traditional watches, or attracting customers to higher luxury tiers. So how does IWC attract someone from that's used to purchasing Seikos? I'm very comfortable with my Seiko. Why should I pay attention to IWC, Rolex, Omega, Breguet? So I started this page, one, to retell quote unquote Saab story, just because we have so many watch enthusiasts. Whenever they're deployed, we can't really show selfies where we are. So they'll send me wrist checks and I'll just slap it on a continent and say, hey, this person's deployed here, this person's deployed there. I've heard people trying to recruit, new soldiers from the conventional army to join SOPs. Like, hey, they've actually used my page. Like, hey, this is what our work is like. Sometimes you're
Wow.
in a tactical scenario. Check out this SKX007. Other times you're working in the U.S. Embassy or working with a corporate partner, and they're wearing a nicer watch in a suit and tie. Just trying to share that. And also at the same time, I use this page to practice my profession, so communication. So I try to retell stories within the text box allotted in Instagram. I try to get to the point. I try to also get people more read up on watches because I do host a lot of special projects, and it's the same challenges. How do I convince someone to spend more than the $20 on a Casio for something like this? And initially, I thought it was because, hey, if I slap the PSYOP logo on a watch, they'll love it. And to people that are company men, people that had been in the unit for over 5-10 years, sure, they'll be all about it because they've already bought in. But then to the newest soldiers, right? So now I have to explain, okay, this is what a mechanical watch is. This is why it's reliable. This is why people purchase it. And then I'm also taking this as a medium to practice my watch designing skills. I have no aspirations of becoming a watchmaker, but I do pay attention to the broader watch market in general and following the trends and seeing what is going to stick as a timeless design. And then I'll implement that in all of my projects. So the A11 is always going to be a timeless design. Most modern watches take their cues from its legibility, the hour markers, just the shaping, the sizing, the shade of the dial, and then just putting little subtle imagery in there for PSYOP, so that way people can wear it whether they're in uniform or when they're long gone and finished with their service. So it's very, very interesting to me to watch how the watch market has moved from just trying to tell people, like, for example, Rolex for its durability. Now they're trying to match it with the fashion industry. So if you watch kind of how the fashion industry moves forward, you've been seeing a lot more brighter colors, and the watch market is starting to kind of attract to it because they're now trying to show, hey, not only is this watch going to last you forever, but you can match it with this outfit in this scenario. And again, just exposing more people to it. And I always thought watches were a very I use my wife test is I'll show her this watch, how much it costs, and she's always like, why? Like, what? The Apple Watch I got you was perfectly fine, honey. And it's, yes, it is, but, and, trying to convince my wife, like, why this is a good idea. I still haven't
Right.
won that fight, but it's a never ending battle.
It's really funny that they use your page to like help in regards to recruiting. And I have a question. I'm just emotionally preparing you. It's half joke, half serious question. Every now and then I'll see a wrist shot and it's someone like taking a wrist shot while driving, and everyone in the community goes, "No, no, no." Is there a psyops version of that for wrist shots? You take a. Is there like, dude, that is so dangerous. What are you doing? Like, is there a version? And if you can't answer that, just blink. Like, I
So,
guess you can't blink. I mean, just say no comment.
so for the physical safety of my soldiers in the formation, do not do a wrist check while you're jumping out of an airplane in action in flight. It is
Fair.
such, yes.
Fair as hell.
I've had people submit it to me, and it's like, one, that's a really cool photo. But two, like, don't do it.
I was gonna say, first of all, badass. Two, please don't do this ever again.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I
And
love it.
then and then also I try to ask people not to show wrist check if it's sensitive. I mean, we all are well read on our regulations on what we can and can't post, but the biggest
Right.
one is you don't want the picture to show one who you are. So for us, not me, Larry personal, but the unit that I'm serving in, and then B,
Mm-hmm.
the location of where you are. So
Sure.
like if I take a
Makes
wrist check
sense.
in front of the Eiffel Tower, it's pretty obvious that I'm in France, even if I tag it as Trader Joe's in North Carolina.
You could be in Vegas.
That's true.
Don't
Yeah,
they
there's
have
a
an
small
Eiffel
one.
Tower in Las Vegas?
Yeah, it's a lot smaller, I know.
It is
Yeah.
much smaller. Dan, you're back. Okay.
Sorry, guys, I had a bit of a connection issue. I'm
No,
back in
no.
now. We're all good.
It's just funny because Larry was like, "Oh, Dan, we haven't heard from you in a bit. Were you talking that whole past like 15 minutes and we just couldn't hear you?"
No, bro. So I did
Okay.
start. I did start answering the question to Mike, and then you just
Okay.
didn't hear it. So it's one of those.
No,
And I
we
was like,
couldn't
you know
hear
what?
you.
I took the direction of leave and rejoin, and then obviously that we seem to be making it work. So we're back in.
It's
You're
good.
back.
Solid. Yeah, feel free to jump in because I think you told me before we started you're actually more on the media side these
Yeah.
days with photography.
So I took a bit of a career change, gents, since I last turned up on the Two Broke Watchdogs podcast. So I'm now in a very small cadre of British Army media specialists. I was fortunate enough to be allowed to apply for that role and pass the subsequent selection and training, and I'm now a British Army photographer. So my role is British military media specialisms, really. So you got stills, video, audio, obviously web and social media kind of stuff, graphic design, all that kind of stuff as well.
Amazing.
And obviously it really helps, right, when it comes to doing wrist shots and videos and the podcast and all that kind of stuff. Now having obviously formalized training in that, and then kind of being on the tools for that, and utilizing stuff which I have in my in my room, in my office to take nice photos of, also helps me obviously become a better tradesman in terms of doing camera work and all that kind of stuff, and audio podcast, interviewing individuals such as Larry and other fantastic guests on my podcast. Also helps with my wider career skills, which is really good. So yeah, that's kind of like the big career change. In terms of obviously where we're at with watches and all that kind of stuff. I'm pleased to say that this January is the 5th anniversary of the Zulu Time podcast, which obviously
Nice.
I think it's really cool. I'm trialing some new merch, obviously, that you can see here for the 5th anniversary. Hopefully, I'll make a decision at some point, and then I'll conduct a influence operation on the Zulu Time podcast in order to, glean interest on potential Zulu Time merch to support the podcast. But other than that, guys, I've just been fortunate to be working alongside, over the last few years, some fantastic companies like Elliott Brown,
That's right.
Proceedus, and then obviously taking delivery of unit watches to my career. So I still count myself at heart as a intelligence corps soldier to an extent, and anytime there's a watch in relation to the intelligence corps, I will always obviously pique my interest. But yeah, I've been designing watches, I've been conducting watch media and interviews and stuff like that, and then a particular watch I thought you guys might like. This is actually a sample watch. This is a Proceedus A11 project, and it's their first blacked out DLC case, which is really cool.
Cool.
But and this is interesting, I was invited to design this watch by the unit. So the unit are very busy. I've worked with the unit in the past, and obviously still know some personalities there, and they've just celebrated their 50th anniversary, and they turned around to me when I came out on a visit to see family and have some downtime from my real job, and they went, "We would like you to design us a watch, because we know that's what you like. It's our 50th anniversary. kind of go wild. You know everything about our unit, and let's see what you come up with. And I would like to just mention, obviously, that Oscar over at Proceedus and myself worked on this design. This is a sample, and the unit will be seeing this week, which is fantastic. And
Amazing.
I'm really pleased with it. So a little bit of, I guess, the Zulu Time podcast, timely moments kind of way is potentially looking at helping other units conduct their special project watches as well, and just kind of being involved in that. And for me, it's just, like I said, it's a creative outlet, right? But it's nerdy, it's watches, and if you can bring other people into the watch fam, then, you know, let's do it.
Heck yeah. That's
Very
so cool.
Yeah, that Elliott Brown is really interesting. Is that
Yeah.
a pure? That's an integrated rubber strap on that. Is that?
Yeah,
is
so
that
this is
quartz?
this is a quartz one. So this is actually an OEM rubber strap by Elliott Brown. I have decided to brighten up my military watches by adding color through straps. So I'm on holiday, so obviously rescue orange is always cool. But this watch, you can just about see the details on the camera, but I'll send you guys some photos when we get off the recording. This watch is the 30th anniversary for the 1st Battalion of the Intelligence Corps. It's got grey, citrus green and scarlet on the dial, which are the core colours, as I mentioned earlier, with my wrist check with the Chris Ward. And then there's other little hints to the watch, which is quite cool. So not that you can really see it on the camera, but if you come to the 3 o'clock, the 3 is an M, and if I turn it to 12, it actually says MI for military intelligence, which is quite cool.
That's cool.
You've got the battalion logo, which is an eagle, and then you've got a globe, which is really cool to say, obviously, how they're globally responsible and globally deployable, which is quite a cool little nod. And then on the back, you've got a nice acid etched crest for the unit. Obviously, we spoke about it earlier, didn't we, Mark? But how obviously they've released a GMT version of the watch. I think what Elliott Brown are doing in terms of their general releases and how that ties into the military and / I guess outdoors adventure kind of, you know, I mean, their motto is worn by adventurers. I think really does, you know, do wonders for our communities, you know, and I'm talking in my experience of the British military now, you know, but they're definitely getting across your side of the Atlantic. You know, they turned up at Wind Up Watch Fair and all of that kind of stuff in Chicago, and I think they're turning up to New York, or the next iteration of Wind Up, which is really cool. You know, and they're getting in there with various, you know, military units across in the States, as well as law enforcement agencies as well, which is really good. And, you know, they just produce a fantastic, clean watch. It's clearly quite different to this Chris Ward, which I would say is probably a little bit more dressy in design. But, you know, again, just an absolutely robust tool watch, which just, like you said, offers that alternative to a Garmin, a Sunto, and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, if this is your one watch in the military, it not only does it, you know, keep time and, you know, will survive the environments that we deploy to, but it has that little bit of added flair in terms of personality, in terms of showing off maybe your unit, or, you know, a point in your career which that individual is proud of. And I think that's the key point, right, with all these special projects, especially in my collection. As you know, I've got quite a few special projects. All these special projects for me highlight a point in my career or a unit in my career that I was proud to be a part of, or to, you know, wanting to commemorate, you know. And I don't know about your opinion on that, Larry, but, you know, that's particularly from my side of the Atlantic and my experience with watches. You know, yes, you were right. You know, guys and girls have an expensive vice that we all bond over, but, you know, there's a Amiga Seamaster, and then there's your unit's Amiga Seamaster as an example, you know, and it just elevates that uniqueness about that piece, and it gets that conversation going.
Is it just me, or am I seeing more about unit watches in general these days? Because I feel like, you know, 10 years ago when Kaz and I or, you know, a little under 10 years ago when Kaz and I started this podcast, I wasn't thinking about that. I didn't see a lot of content about unit watches. I didn't see those what was it, that Omega Seamaster that was it the King of Denmark that
Yeah,
wore
so
one?
the King of Denmark has got the Danish Frogman Commando iteration of the Seamaster, hasn't he? Which is quite cool.
Yeah.
It's that black dial, and then obviously, the more recent, I guess, incident in the news was the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, where you saw the watch on the wrist of the Secret Service
Yeah.
operator. And that was, the joy of high def imagery. We can zoom right in and see what that is, right? But I think unit watches, have definitely exploded since I'd say 2018 properly. In my experience and my opinion, I'd say that companies like Bremont probably really started pushing the social media piece, advertising the watches with digital renders all the time and all of that kind of stuff. But we all know that these unit watches existed before. There was, for example, you've got a Breitling Avenger Seawolf, I believe, which was to the Special Forces for the UK. It had a blue dial, made of titanium, had the cat badge on the back. Very famous. There was a incident where a security services for UK, their Breitling was put on eBay, and that made the Sun newspaper because the owner wasn't meant to try and sell it on eBay, and he got
That's
reprimanded, which is
great.
quite funny.
Sure.
But again, detailed photos of the dial, and the moment these dials come out into social media or onto auction sites, they get shared around, don't they? Because again, I think this is an example where military cross expensive vice, and these people who collect these outside of the military, they might not actually be into the military. They just might want to collect a unique watch, which is completely different to, like you said, a normal Breitling Avenger in that term. For the MI5 watch, the buyers might not have wanted anything to do with MI5, but they wanted the fact that it had a different crest on the dial.
So I think that makes me wonder, and this is one of those topics that I think military watch people love to swirl over a lot. Larry, you spoke about the safety of your people a lot, and we're just like talking about unit watches and things like that. Is there kind of like an operations security issue that you think of when people are wearing these like special unit watches or anything like that, or is that kind of like a sexy spy story that isn't really a big deal?
So when it comes to like wearing it in the broad community, right? If I just go out to the mall with my family and I'm wearing, my PSYWAR watch that has the crest, if you Google it, you'll know it. I don't foresee it as a significant risk because, one, we're not secret spies at all. You can always Google psychological operations. Some of the nature of our work can be sensitive, but when we're deployed or forward, there's no issues with wearing that watch because, we'll deploy under either, a joint task force or we're working for the U.S. Embassy. And when the embassy receives their passports, it's well known that, hey, these guys from, North Carolina or wherever in the U.S. are here to do whatever their work is. It's out there in the open. But where it does get sensitive, and it's actually a big issue because people just forget, like these watches disappear into our wrists and we forget we're wearing them, is just smartwatches and a lot of fitness watches when we're deployed or stateside. So a lot of our offices are within these very sensitive areas where we're not allowed to wear Garmin's. We're not allowed to wear anything that pings GPS or Bluetooth. And it's been a operational issue where, the adversary, if they really wanted to track where U.S. soldiers were, they would just have to find a way to get into their Garmin watches. Hey, this person, they can track you from the baseline where, hey, this person wearing this Garmin watch runs around this neighborhood, and then they travel to this base. And we know that inside of this base is a very sensitive unit. Oh, now all of a sudden this GPS is this person in a X country, they're foreign deployed, and now they're doing their fitness runs around this foreign military base, and you can build a profile off of someone just with their watch. And I'm not trying to tell people, especially my soldiers, to be paranoid about it. It's just being one, just never wear your GPS watches in the office space anyway, which kind of helped with the mechanical watch craze. And I think that's where it kind of started, because I can wear this watch, it looks nice, I can wear it in the office, I don't have to take it off. But then also at the same time too, not to be, worried so much, because I promise you, I don't think, the our adversary is tracking what I'm doing at this very second. And even if they were, the thought of a foreign military doing something on a U.S. citizen that's not even deployed, it's a huge global issue, But when people wear them out, it's one of our training is, if people ask, like, if let's say a foreign you start a conversation with someone while you're on deployment and ask what you do, the best thing you can do is tell the truth. Like, as soon as you start saying shady things like, well, I work for the embassy, and they're like, well, you're clearly in the military. I never said that. I may or may not be associated with the military. But then if you can go on the embassy's website, see your name, it's like, yeah, you're in the military, so why are you being shady in the first place? So just normal life. And I've seen, like, a lot of people will wear their quote unquote flex watches anyway. I've seen so many brigades. I've seen so many, a lot of JLCs especially. They'll wear that when they're forward. Yeah. And to that point on military watches, how long it's existed, there is a general officer within the special operations community that I talk to pretty frequently about watches. One of his biggest regrets is when he was in a unit that he never purchased their Breitling, because they had a Breitling release. And I know it's pretty common that in Australia, a lot of their higher tier units, they have an issued Breitling, and they wear it out. And if you know what the logo is, that's kind of like, hey, that's cool. And if you don't, you don't. It's just an interesting design on a watch.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of back that up about this interesting design, and like you said, I think the danger with wearing these kind of watches out is more the fact that they're nice watches, right? And I think you're going to get targeted for theft more than anything else. And after the matter of fact of a theft, if the person who takes it from the service person then looks at it before they decide to get rid of it, offload it for money, or keep it, then they'll either realize it's slightly different to a normal one after they've Googled it. They're not looking at it necessarily because they know that this says MI on the dial, and therefore they're going to target someone just for an MI watch. You know what I mean? If someone gets that close to me to see what is actually on this dial, it's all gone wrong if I'm being targeted for theft at that point, or anything more nefarious, as it were.
Right.
A fun fact, though, is, and I've seen this on a couple of my deployments, the actual $20 Casio or the G-Shocks, that actually has raised more questions when I've been overseas. I've worked with a lot of foreign partners there, and they'll say, hey, we know you're U.S. military because either one, the sleeves, the full tatted sleeves, or B, you look a lot more fit than the rest of the population, or C, you're wearing some massive GPS or G-Shock. So I've had people before deploying overseas, they're saying, hey, I keep getting made fun of for having that military watch. What do you recommend? And I always say, hey, Casio Duro or Timex Expedition, $20, buy it and forget it, and you'll blend in, because no one thinks twice on a Casio Duro. But people will, especially overseas where they do receive military presence, they'll know that G-Shock is a military person.
I love being spotted as oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, yeah, you're wearing like the Gators sunglasses on top of that, and you have like the tactical beard and
the military haircut.
Yeah, the Black Rifle Coffee Company trucker hat. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I love being identified as overseas American military by your physique being more fit than others. So effectively, if you just kind of let yourself go, you could be invisible. You could actually be invisible. If you
we can be spies, Kaz, you and I, yeah.
Right? I'd be a terrible spy. I'm way too loud.
That's
so interesting, though.
what I've also found though with wearing these kind of special military dials though, which is quite cool, is we talk about Kaz, are you more likely to meet a watch guy by having that conversation in the elevator or that kind of stuff in passing with the bloke with the
Right.
with the Rolex, or insert other famous watch brand here or whatever. But I have always found that people who wear these military watches will take time out and speak to you about their project, and you get a decent story, shall we say. It happened to me last week. I was on a course. Someone actually recognized this watch on my wrist, and they're like, "Is that
Wow.
what I think that is?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." Actually, he mistook it for a slightly different project, very similar. And I was like, "Yeah, it is. It's from the same company. It's same ilk." And they're like, "Oh, can I see it?" So she take it off to show them. They're really, really kind of enamored by it. And then like the next day, the guy came in and he was just like, "This is my daily watch," and he showed me what he was wearing, and you instantly just connect, right? And it's not just because you're on a course that no one really wants to be on together, and you're just trying to get through it and trying to just survive to the weekend. But I have
Right.
had compliments, or queries on what I've been wearing because they recognise the case shape, or they recognise something that's slightly different on the dial because, we're working in very close quarters with each other, which is interesting.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, they may not have gotten the exact iteration, but at least they were in the ballpark when they recognized, the
Yeah,
case
he
and
was.
everything like
Yeah,
that.
he stopped me in the ballpark and he just went, "Is that an Elliot Brown? Was that the one that was made for this?" And I was like, "Oh wow, that's someone who's quite direct in knowing what they wanted to talk about,
Right?
which is cool, right? And like you said,
They
I think that's
weren't.
how
They
you
weren't
convert
like.
people.
Yeah, they weren't like sweet Timex, bro. And you were just like, thanks, man. Like at least they were like, Mike. Didn't that
Yeah.
happen to you? Didn't someone call your tutor a Tisso? Tiso?
So that did happen to me at the mall. Somebody
Yeah, that
was
guy was
like,
not in the same
"Hey,
ballpark. That dude was on
nice
a
to."
different planet.
But I did also I did also have a very romantic encounter with a wayward watch friend, a possible watch mate, I suppose.
A watch misconnection, an orological misconnection.
An orological mistress, I guess. He was a dude, but I don't know.
It counts.
He saw my doxa. I was taking a ferry from
Oh, yeah.
Seattle to Bremerton, and he saw the doxa, he saw the orange dial, but not only did he see the orange dial, he saw the little emblem that had the U.S. Divers Co. thing. And
Hmm.
he just like ran up to me and he said, "Is that an aqualung doxa?" And I was like, "Whoa, you're 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 a little too forward right now, man." So that was
Did you think you were going to get robbed for it?
I
He was
I
just
didn't.
confirming before he took it off your wrist.
That's
Yeah,
so
exactly.
funny.
Well, he kind of looked like it's kind of funny because he looked military to me. Actually, like we have a lot of those folks out here, um, more than you would think, and I didn't really feel threatened or anything. I thought like, wow, you're really into this kind of stuff. So I was more surprised that he knew, I guess, the lore behind the Doxa watches than anything else. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
So he ran up to you. He asked, "Is that a doxa?" You said yes, and then you guys held hands and watched the water until the ferry
Until you
got to the other
got to the other
side.
side. Yeah.
Yeah, just
We did-
enjoyed the moments.
So I did leave my wife for a little bit and sit on a bench with him and just chat.
I'm gonna go
So,
sit with that stranger and talk watches.
Nice.
I
Yeah,
love you.
I literally I did that. So
I had a similar
That's
one.
awesome.
I was taking a photo of doing a wrist check on the Alcatraz ferry to Alcatraz when I came across to America for a work trip, and there was a military guy who's very big into watches now. He's always been big into watches, but he actually had ended up leading a couple of special projects after this, and he just looked over at me and went, what are you doing? Like that. And I was like, "Oh no, it's my nerdy hobby. Don't pay attention to it. Yeah, it's a bit weird. I take photos of my watches." And then he just he just showed me his camera roll, and he did exactly the same thing. He went, "Bro, I do this too." And I'm like, "Oh yes, we can be kindred spirits."
We just became best friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
That's
I've got a
funny.
question for you guys though about military watches, because I think it'd be interesting to get your opinion. Obviously, given the fact that you guys, haven't joined the military, but what's your opinion on, like people wearing those commemorative watches? So, for example, Citizen with their, branded Red Arrows watches or Blue Angels watches where, you've got the logo of a unit on a dial, where you can just go out and buy it at any, jewelers, and that's completely legit. It's fine. But, you know what I mean? What's your opinion on that? Because obviously there's clearly infinitely less Blue Angels pilots in the world than there are those citizen watches out in the wild, right? So what is your opinion on people who do that? You know what I mean? Because for
Yeah.
me, being in the military, I look at that as, obviously that's fine, happy days. The where I get very confused or slightly uncomfortable is where maybe someone tries to pull the wool over my eyes because they don't know what I do, and they're like, oh yeah, I got this because I'm a Blue Angels pilot, or it'll be, you know, a watch I see them kind of marketed towards like teenagers where, they're aspiring to be something, and it's almost like, well, my kid's aspiring to be a Red Arrows pilot for Christmas. I'm going to buy him the Red Arrows watch. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
those kind of watches fall into those kind of categories. Whereas I feel quite uncomfortable if I ended up sparking a conversation with a fully grown adult, for want of a better expression, where they're like, yeah, I used to be a Red Arrows pilot. And it's just like, yeah, the likelihood of you being a Red Arrows pilot is next to nil because there's
Right.
only 10 of them every display year. You know what I mean? So,
That's funny. I have a response, Mike, but do you have a response? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm just to be frank, I'm not a fan. So the Blue Angel citizens have been around for so long that I kind of see them as a little harmless at this point. But I've seen from brands like Luminox and some other brands that even, I had a watch on hand recently that had, the eagle, globe, and anchor emblem for the Marines, and like that, you know, earning that is not a joke. Earning that, earning those stripes, that's no joke. And just to be able to purchase it with a watch, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. Um, I I like to dig a little bit deeper. I like to find, hey, this, and maybe because I'm a watch podcaster and watch writer or whatever, I like to find, the old marathons or the CWCs that people don't really think about. But
mhm.
I feel that way, but at the same time, I see the marketing behind the James Bond Omega Seamasters, and here's James Bond. He's MI6. He's former SBS, and it's kind of the same thing. And as much as I don't like it, I feel like there's no escaping it. So I probably won't go for a watch just based solely on the fact that it was for a specific unit or anything like that. I don't think you should be able to. I don't think I should be able to buy those watches. And I actually saw there's a retailer that Kaz, you and I talk about a lot, and he had a very specific French Navy Tudor for sale, and it was well over six figures. Well over six figures for this.
Did you affirm it or did you PayPal credit it? What did you do?
I just
to
felt
get it?
I felt icky because I really liked the guy and I saw him just like selling it. But yeah, you can just play army soldier if you have the money, and that kind of stuff rubs me the wrong way. So yeah, Dan, to answer your question, I'm not really a fan of that kind of stuff. If I do find myself lusting over similar watches, I think it would be more generally in the sense of appreciating the historical time period. So say like the moment where CWC stepped in after Rolex, with the quartz pieces or the automatic pieces, or say like the Smiths, the last, British watch that actually saw service. So something I would try to look for something a little bit deeper. I might stay away from overtly marketed unit watches or something like
Yeah.
that.
No, that's interesting. Kaz, what's your feelings on it?
It's very conflicted, and so I'll explain that, kind of how I mean that in a second. The idea that if I see someone wearing, like, I'll stick on the Blue Angels. citizen piece. If I see someone wearing that watch, I understand that, at least from my interpretation, they want me to infer something about their watch choice as it reflects on them. So if I see you wearing that watch, you either are some kind of aviation fan, or maybe on the potential more kind of weird side, kind of like you're saying, Dan, you want me to think you're a Blue Angels pilot, or something like that. I initially do have a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction because I might read too much into it in regard to that impetus of what they want me to infer about their personality, where I think, hey man, you can't buy cool. Because that's kind of what I would associate it. The idea that I'm not a Blue Angels pilot. Oh, I couldn't pass the test because I have glasses. So maybe if I buy a Blue Angels, not glasses, astigmatism, I don't know. Maybe if I buy a Blue Angel Citizen, maybe I can give this idea off that I'm a pilot or something like that. That's kind of weird. I never really liked the idea of someone feeling like they could purchase their way into some kind of narrative that maybe they didn't have some sort of blood, sweat, or tears into. But then on the side where I'm conflicted, Michael and I always talk about how people should just feel free to collect however they want.
Mm.
And if people want to do that and it's not hurting anyone, great. But I have to sort of gut check that initial knee-jerk reaction. Another sort of analogy I'll draw is my wife and I are super into just like food and different culinary experiences and things like that. And we're always trying to see new, different, exciting things that people do. And there's an initial knee-jerk reaction where if I'm watching like a YouTuber and their favorite food is like chicken fingers and honey mustard, initially I'm just like, oh, you're missing out on so much in life. But who the fuck am I to judge them? They just want to eat chicken fingers and honey mustard. Like, what does it matter to me? It's not hurting me. So conflicted in that sense. If that at all makes sense.
No, it does.
It
does.
I have a soft spot for the Blue Angels Citizens though, because my dad used to take me to see them a lot at Homestead Air Base down in Florida, and they would sell the watches down in booths and stuff, and you could just feel really cool and just buy one. And
dude, I grew up on Fort Lauderdale Beach. They'd have air shows. Those things would show up and shake the whole house. It was great.
Yeah.
Car alarms would go off. It was awesome.
Good times. No, like I said, I was just interested to see your opinion on it. Like I said, from military watches in terms of like almost an outsider's perspective in. You know what I mean? Because it's always interesting. Like me and Larry will talk wax lyrical within like the Liberty Watch Group, chat, and we'll talk about watches and military watches and these projects, and everyone really appreciates them for their different reasons, and they ask questions. But it's always interesting just to see a slight outsider's perspective in, and I say slight because obviously, you guys are in the watch space, you're not a complete watch muggle as termed by another watch podcaster.
Right. I think what I'm more critical of, or what I'm more critical of, I have no idea. What I'm more critical of are maybe brands that try to leverage the fact that there are people out there who would buy something just because it has some sort of association, whether it's manufactured or historical brand, was purchased by another entity and they're trying to, revive that. I'm maybe a little more critical of brands in regards to that idea that you were presenting initially, Dan. But to the actual end user, the person who buys the watch, it's fine. As long as they're not cutting me off in traffic or, anything like that, it's fine. I'm trying to take it personally.
So, what is I guess as we're nearing the end of the episode, what is what's the next watch for you guys? Like, what are each of you kind of eyeballing as the next purchase?
So I've got a watch coming in actually, which was another special project which I designed. So I'm waiting for a Basel watch to come in. So Basel is out in Australia. They're famed for utilizing hollow crowns with sapphire displays in the crown, so you can see what's inside them. And they put various elements inside the crowns depending on what the watch is, right? So, for example, the majority of the Basel watches have material, i.e. earth or sand from the beaches and famous geographical locations within the continent of Australia. The idea being that you take an element of Australia with you wherever you are, right? I collabed, for want of a better expression, with them out the back of an interview I conducted with Barzell, because they turned around on the mic and they said to me, if you've got an idea for a project, we'll happily utilize it. While Mike's obviously sharing the screen, I'll get you to direct to it. So I believe it's under watches and limited editions. And then I'll talk through about the watch a little bit more once we find it. So I don't know if there's a search function on the website. Just type in Langstone, and you'll find it. It's the D-Day 80th anniversary watch. We're searching it,
Mike,
guys.
you might be better off just Googling it,
Yeah.
Barzell, and then the name of the watch.
Yeah. Langstone is Langstone. This might be up your street, Mike, with historical references as well. Yep, that's it there.
Cool.
So this watch takes inspiration from the Costi watches, which were effectively early special forces and swimmer canoeist watches, originally made by Longines. They were nicknamed the tuna can watches because they had big crowns and there was a bigger case physically compared to the more famous and ubiquitous Dirty Dozen watches and Army timepiece watches. What stands this watch apart is not only does it have a sandwich dial, as you can see there in that render, but it also has real blued hands, heat blued hands, like the original watches would have had in World War II, with the original hand shaped on the second hand, which is, I nickname it a kite or diamond second hand. And then it's got that oversized crown, which obviously back in World War II era, the oversized crown enabled the swimmer canoeists to obviously screw down the crown while wearing gloves if required and all that kind of stuff to operate the watch. Also, the physically bigger crown enabled it to have more water resistancy back, in the day of, how they used to case seal their watches back like that. It also has a screw-down case back as per the original. This is clearly a modern interpretation of that watch. And we designed that, released 80 of them, and the sand inside the crown is sand from the beaches of Normandy. And then on the back, you've got some funky engravings, which is quite cool. So that's my next watch that's coming in, and I'm very pleased to say that that was actually my largest special project to date, in the fact that it wasn't limited to a unit, it wasn't limited to a cap badge, it wasn't limited to a anniversary in terms of military unit anniversary where personnel had to serve at this unit for a specific time, or all of that kind of stuff. This was just a commemoration of D-Day, and obviously an element of the watch sales have gone to charity as well. So open to everyone internationally. It was just a little thing for Basel to kind of, commemorate the actions that happened on D-Day 80 years ago.
Very cool.
And some cool loom, as you can see.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
I guess for me, for my next personal watch purchase, I'm kind of on a hold for myself, just because I think I've attained that temporary watch abyss. I'm very happy with my collection, and I feel like if I purchase another watch, it's not going to make its way into the rotation, because I keep rotating between my Grand Seiko, the A11, my Nomos, and my Breitling. So, however, for the next design, the PSYWAR A11, with everything that they gave us, the NH35, the little sapphire casing, it came out to $250. And I thought that was the limit that a soldier that is not a watch aficionado would spend on. I think like $250 is a lot of money to a lot of people. So as this watch has been released and making its way out throughout the space, a lot of people started asking, hey, what's the next project? And I've actually started receiving feedback where people saying, hey, okay, I get it now. Are you going to design something with a more upscale brand? Are you looking Tudor Omega, which is a massive jump to go from $250 to over 5K? So for me personally, and if to anyone in the regiment that's listening, I've been hesitant on going with Omega or Tudor, which has been the standard in Tudor, Rolex, or Omega, which has been the standard for high-end luxury associated with the military and the government community, mostly because it's hard to kind of market that and tell people to spend that much money where it's like, okay, what's important to you? Is it the unit brand or is it the watch brand? Because if you want an Omega, just go out and buy an Omega, right? Like, why do I need to now force, like, I've been working with Omega. It's a at least 50 minimum purchase, and to ask 50 people to purchase, to spend that kind of money, it's,
Right.
I don't feel ethically cool with it because I can't even convince myself to spend $5,000 on a watch that, I might not be fully sold on. So the next watch project that I'm moving with, I've been working with Elliott Brown with their Holton GMT, and I wanted to give it the practical functionality where in the bezel I'm putting all of our geographic commands as opposed to the time. So for example, the European command is out in Germany. So if you turn the bezel to, let's say, Eastern Standard Time, you will know what the time is in Germany. A lot of us work with partners. A lot of us have frequent meetings, whether it be in Hawaii with the Indo-PACOM command, or we're talking to African command out in Germany. It's a nice way to kind of showcase GMTs. I've seen that trend kind of on the rise with the World Timer. So I wanted to replace some cities with the locations of our commands that are unclassified. And then the more I dig into this, and the more people are asking, hey, I want to wear something that's a little bit dressier than the A11. So like the A11 was designed that you can wear it, but I had it um, bead blasted so it can hide scratches a lot better, but people want something shiny. So I've been trying to reach out with Ver because I've been looking at their A12 ceremony Swiss in gold.
Nice.
And I like how they market it as their version of the Caltrava. And I've done a couple of small focus groups on what their thoughts are on it. And people are actually all about the gold. And that's where I've been asking around, like, hey, I need people with creative, artistic calligraphy, and I would love to showcase your work. So now,
Mm.
instead of, just showcasing watch and logo, now this is watch, and within it is, one of our practitioners' work. Um, but the point that I'm trying to get at is, I've been set for the future of my page to just design watches at under $500. But now that people who have never spent that kind of money are now reaching out and asking, and it's a pretty overwhelming number. They're saying, "Hey, I'm willing to spend up to 1,000. Hey, I'm willing to spend up to 2,000. Hey, what are you going to do an Omega release?" That I'm starting to see it at the, I guess, the micro level of how the watch market works. Just exposing them to this, they wear it, they love it, now they want more, they're doing more research. And like I've even gotten feedback where it's like, hey, I've been looking at this Salida movement, it's just like the CW, like, can you work with something like that? And I have to constantly communicate back like, hey man, like, the more premium the materials, the movement, everything, the more expensive it's going to be. And I've
Right.
gotten feedback where they're like, shoot, I'll spend that money, let's go. So for me, I'm gonna hold for personal watches because the next two projects between Elliott Brown, and if I could work out with Ver, um, I would personally purchase them because my first project was the Christopher Ward GMT, and that one I expected, I think, 25 people to purchase it, and we exceeded 70 or 80. And I have a little bit of FOMO, but at the same time, I bought my Grand Seiko, and I just didn't want to buy another watch at the time. So
Right.
again, I try to be as practical as I can because I feel uncomfortable asking soldiers to spend money just to be in the club. Like, you have to actually want it. You think it looks good. And it's fun now that as I design watches, I'm receiving feedback from people. It's not just me working. Now I can kind of like work with the regiment on producing something that everyone will enjoy and love and would be close to the PSYOP profession. Like this, I'm glad that Presidus and Christopher Ward have kept it in house with us, because it kind of loses, to myself personally, it kind of loses its value if any person on the street can just wear the same watch. We went through an assessment and selection. We've all had our deployments. We've worked to get to where we are.
I just want to echo one
Sweet.
point that you just made there, Larry. I think the other point is, in terms of being a project leader, the effort between you as a project leader and whichever company you go to, there's so many weeks to maybe months of work before we even release these watches and these designs. And then one of the hardest parts that I found as a project leader is actually just getting people to sign up or buy something based off the digital render, right? You know, it's all very well seeing a watch like this on your wrist or on a colleague's wrist, and they pick it up, they get to feel it, it's tactile, they get to try it on and go, oh, that's really amazing, I'm going to buy that because that encompasses my unit. Try and do that on an A4 like poster, and sometimes it's not even printed like to scale. It will just be on a phone screen that, as we know, you know, how big's an iPhone screen, you know, and they just see that in passing, and then trying to get people to commit to that, and then it's over X amount of hundred or maybe thousands of dollars or pounds equivalent. It's really hard.
I believe it. But no, that's amazing. It's just so cool to hear about the projects and then just hear how one thing leads to another, but then also trying to keep it in check. Larry, I love the idea of, you know, people are saying like, oh, when are you going to collaborate with Omega? And you're like, I don't know if that makes sense. I think it would be hilarious if you did collaborate with Omega or Tudor or Rolex and you know, advertently just did something that looked like total dog shit just to see what happens. Just to see what would happen. You know what I mean?
And I have reached out. I have been hired. I've been hired as a creative director for a watch project for another organization, and they're going with Omega. Unfortunately, for everyone that's looking to work with the big brands, Omega has such a large queue with whatever projects they're working on. They asked me, hey, it's going to be a couple of months before we can even visit this idea. And when it comes to designing something like Omega, like it is funny. I've thought like, let's just slap the most obnoxious logo and see how they
terrible looking.
Just ruin it, right? But then the more that I worked with the team and I started designing, you know, this Omega watch, and you know, the higher the price point is, the more subtle that thing has to be. For example, so like the Tudor Black Bay 58 for Milan, right? Yes, they have the logo, but what sticks out is that dial color. So working with Omega, right? Like, how do you now explain this unit in this watch without detracting from the Omega design? Because for me, as a watch enthusiast, I buy the Omega because of Omega's language, not because of what Larry thinks is right. But you know what? I'm a huge fan of being an agent of chaos. I'll probably sit there like, hey guys, what are your thoughts on this Seamaster? Just have a
you never know.
Agent of chaos. I love it.
Right? At least just to save the emails. Be like, I'm going to print these emails out just so I can have as a reminder the responses to my amazing questions. What if we did this? What if we did like rainbow anodized bezels? What do you think? You know? Mike, do you remember that rainbow Invicta? That like it's still in the Two Broke Watch Snobs community.
The perfect military watch. Yeah.
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 It totally flies under the radar.
Under the radar. Yep.
Yeah. That thing was amazing. Well, let's do this as we kind of near towards the end. Larry, Dan, do you both want to do quick shout outs for your for each of your respective, you know, projects, Instagrams, podcast, anything? And then Mike, we can let the kids get back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Larry, Dan, I'll pass it to you guys.
Okay, so I'll take it off then. So obviously, if you want to follow anything else to do with military watches in terms of from the British side of the house, obviously please go and check out the Zulu Time podcast. We are on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and a few other podcast platforms that Anchor / Spotify obviously disseminate to. Please give us a like and a follow. and also give me some feedback on the podcast, because I'm always looking to obviously mix up my episodes and topics and all that kind of stuff. If the podcast isn't for you, I have an Instagram page, which is timely_moments. Please, again, reach out. Talk about watches. I can talk about watches for hours, as my family and my friends will know. And yeah, just reach out. And then the final one is a shout out to the Recon Team watch blog. I'm a contributor on there for written articles, because I have decided to start flexing my written articles on there as well. So give Justin over at the Recon Team watch blog a follow. He's obviously on Instagram as well. And like I said, that's where you'll find my written articles, which don't come out as often as the podcast, or my photography on the Instagram. But it's another medium for me to obviously kind of spark conversation in the world of military watches. So if that stuff sounds like, your bag, I'm more than happy to talk until the cows come home about watches, especially when I have an internet connection that works.
There you go. Amazing. Larry.
Hey, so Mike Cass, first of all, thank you so much for welcoming us to this episode. You guys make my commutes to work a lot of fun. It's a 45-minute drive, and I love listening to your episodes. And I also love that we're all on the same frequency when it comes to watches. But if anyone that's interested in how I retell PSYOP story, and also how I try to inform people on watches, I like to explain what mechanical watch is, automatic, quartz, why it's relevant, why brands are relevant. I love following all the big watch releases from the other big brands. So I try to highlight them and try to get people as informed on watchmaking as they can. So if they do decide to swipe that card, that it's an informed decision rather than just a emotional purchase just because they want to copy something. But also anyone that's in the North Carolina area, I'll have to give a shout out to the Liberty Watch Group on Instagram. That's at Liberty Watch Group. We do monthly meetups with other watch enthusiasts. We drop the location through DMs for security reasons, but there is a massive watch community, and we always love to have new people come out, network, chat, talk watches. And I'll have to give shout out to my homies. So at Watches Win Wars, he does a great job of retelling watchmaking or watches through service. And then Bulletproof Bezel, and also at the Covert Crown. So the Covert Crown is more in the military intelligence community. And then I like to focus on the broader psychological operations and special operations community. So at PSYWAR Wristcheck, thank you guys.
Hell yeah. So cool. Mike, is it that time? Do you want to start it out, and then I'll close it?
These guys are so much cooler than we are.
Everyone we've had on the show is way cooler than us, and that's okay. That's just, we're happy to have people on here.
All right. Yep. Fine. I'll say bye, and then hope everybody enjoys the show. Thanks for listening, guys. My name is Mike,
and this is Kaz. You have been listening to Two Broke Watch Snobs. Later.